Hi everyone, it's Dr. Loretta Ann coming to you. If you haven't seen one of my videos before, I briefly want to introduce myself. My name is Dr. Loretta Ann Welling Phillips. Shortly, I pray that I'll just be Dr. Loretta Welling. I'll be getting my Phillips removed. And I want to briefly talk to you about my agency. We are called Breaking the Chains Wellness and Resource Center. We are located in Ohio. However, our services is for everyone in the country. We do handle things by phone, telecommunications, by computer. We go by Skype, Facebook, whatever is a good communication service for you, we will use. So we concentrate on life coaching, trial advocacy, trial consulting, case management, and basically prison advocacy, where we can go into the prisons, help people adjust even while they're in prison, before they go to prison, and after prison. We help you get back on your feet and work with you in obtaining a job, trying to find out where you fit into society, which is going into what the post and what I posted today, and also what the video is going to be about today. So if you see me look down, the post I wrote today is 3 pages long. So I would love to tell you that I got this great memory, and I would love to tell you that I could remember everything, which I do sorta, but I have to have cues. So if you see me looking down or across the way, I'm just reminding myself on what I want to tell you, and I don't want to forget any important parts. So many people wrote me and said, "We love when you do your videos, and we love the written post, but could you please do a video and say it verbally?" So this is what I'm doing, and I am going to honor that wish of several people who asked me to do this. So one of the things that I found difficult when I came home from incarceration is not having my parents here. Both my mother and father passed away while I was incarcerated. I was wrongfully incarcerated, but as you know, the government in Ohio really didn't care. They were out to prove a point, in my opinion, to make a buck, in my opinion. And these are my opinions, but I pretty much have facts to this. But to save myself from heartache, I'm going to say that's my opinion. So what happened was I was not allowed to the prison didn't provide me a whole lot of support. The day my father died, August 19th of 2019, the prison did not really help me. They allowed me to lay on the floor and cry, and the CO would not come to attention and help me at whatsoever. I had to have a fellow inmate who was my friend run downstairs and scream for anybody to pay attention. So it's a very difficult time in prison when loved ones die, and it's a very hard time finding somebody who understands. But it's even worse when you come out and those people aren't there. So the biggest part and a tip that I can tell you you're going to deal with when you leave prison or you're newly released is changes in who's around you, changes in electronics, changes in society, changes in prices of food, just changes everywhere you look. And this video is going to specifically talk about the severe changes of people not there in your life. So the first tip is to get yourself hooked up with social media. I know that sounds stupid, but if you treat social media as a healthy coping skill, what you do within social media is you link yourself to support groups on there. There are many support groups that help with people who are or have been incarcerated. There are people like myself who have reached out and are trying to help you. And there's plenty of those people trying to say, listen, I am here for you to talk to. They can help you and give you some advice and some tips on how they rebuilt their lives, as I am giving you on how I rebuilt mine. I was fortunate enough that my brother had developed a plan with my mom and dad before they passed, that instead of them being buried, they would be cremated. And at the time that I arrived at home, that I would be the one to bury them. And so my brother and my parents, prior to their death, gave me the opportunity to mourn in my time. So my parents are still sitting on the shelf downstairs. I know that sounds terrible. I always joke and say elf on a shelf, but they're above a shelf on the fireplace, and I look at them every day, and I'm not ready to quite have that burial yet, but I will. And my brother left that to me because he knew I needed to mourn and have a grieving process. Not very many people leaving prison have that support. Yes, I have a lot of support from one person. I also have support from a few friends out there that have come to me. I would love to say their names because the one works for me, Paul Hahn, and the other one is Lee McCartney, who has been there and talked to me through things. Marlo Johnson and a few other people have just been by my side, and those are the people that have helped me adjust. And if you have those people in your life, some you may need to apologize to. I mentioned that later in the blog post that I wrote earlier and I posted. I said, forgiveness from the other person. We want to keep grudges. And sometimes the person that you don't think is going to be there. I didn't think my brother would be there for me. I didn't. And he was. The people who I thought would be there for me, my aunts, uncles, and family members, I didn't even hear from them when I was in prison. I didn't get a car. I didn't get nothing. So I learned to change my thinking. And later on in this video, I'm going to talk to you about how I changed my thinking process about that. But I want to continue to go on to number 2. You need to attend meetings to deal with the change that has happened in society since you had been locked up. And being behind bars gives you a whole different view of how much you miss the real world. So you want to get involved in a religious meeting. If you have a spiritual belief, you want to go to a church meeting, a support meeting, an AA meeting, an NA meeting, an HA meeting, something that you can gather with people. It doesn't have to have a religious or spiritual affiliation whatsoever. You can go just to a plain support group. If you really want a support group and you live in my area, I would be more than happy to start one for the people who've been incarcerated and just released, and give you some ideas and talk to other people who have been in the same situation we have. Okay, it's worth your while. The main thing I want you to realize is what I had mentioned earlier. You need to ask for help from your family. You may not want to. You may have had some trouble in the past. You may feel like, oh my gosh, they're not going to help me because of things I've done in the past. But hey, you've been in prison, and hopefully you've taken groups in prison, and hopefully you've released some of the anger and for no matter what you were in there for, and worked through some of the issues you were going through in there. And so talking to your loved ones and giving them time to forgive you and just kind of laying a baseline and a starting over line, it works wonders. And allow the people that you don't think are going to help you, allow them the chance. It's not fair not to give them the chance to try to reach out. It may be their desire to help you and they're waiting for you to approach them. They don't always have to be the one to approach you. Guess what? You're not in the situation to do that. You need to ask for help and not be ashamed of it, because there's nothing ashamed of being released and newly released and needing some assistance. There just isn't. I already briefly talked to you about the death of a loved one. And this is one of the biggest things in prison that not only I lived through, but I watched my fellow inmates go through. There's not a lot of support in prison. So there's the adjustment of walking into your home or wherever you go, and your parents may not be there, your husband may not be there, your child may not be there. Even if the children are alive, they may be somewhere else, and they may be with a different caretaker at the moment. And this is an adjustment to take, and you miss them, and you're going through a grief process. And I want to make this very clear. You do not have to have someone die in order to go through a grief process. It is something that you lose that means a lot to you. I went through a grief process over my private practice. I went through a grief process over losing just the way of life that I was used to. So this is not just for people who have passed away. In my case, I was in a different role. That's another change. Everybody who returns from home is in a different role. When you enter the house, you may no longer be the one who supports the household. You may not be the head of the household. You may be fitting in a different role, and finding out where you fit in is very significant. And you need to allow room to change. It's going to be uncomfortable, but allow the people that have been around to guide you. Do not have a I know it all attitude. I have to be in control. So if you're returning to a home where you had a loved one pass away and they're not there, as for me, my brother lived here. He's the one that took care of my parents. He's the one that went through all that stuff. I mean, yeah, he gave me step by step, and I did what I could while I was incarcerated. But my brother knew what was going on in this household. So when I came back into this household, I allowed my brother to direct me. And he wasn't a jerk about it. He knew I was uncomfortable. He knew I didn't know where I was. He knew I just didn't know where I stood. So he guided me, and I allowed him to do that. I didn't get into a power struggle. This was his home while I was incarcerated. This is what he knew. This is where he watched my parents die as well. And I needed to respect his feelings as much as he was respecting mine. So you need to understand that the world isn't about you and understanding you. I know that there's a lot of stress with being released, and I know there's a lot of stress in having to get used to the changes. But understand the same people, the stress you're going under with change, they're under stress because now you're home. They're not used to having you home. So they're going through changes too. So the same stress you're feeling, they're feeling. So it's very, very significant that you respect and understand other people's changes and how they're feeling, along with you when you're going through being released and trying to cope with the different things in home, that, the different standards, the different rules, just the whole environment and stimuli of where you're living could be different. And it just takes some adjustment. And so the biggest thing is time. That is the thing I can tell you the most. Time is your best friend. Don't let anybody tell you that you have to get over somebody that you have lost, your family member, your friend, your loved one, quickly. It is your time. If it takes you 15 years, it takes you 15 years, because I got to be honest with you. I still cry when I see shows, when I see my mom's clothes. I've been hosting my mom's clothes, as you guys can see, because I'm trying to sell them. I cry every time I'm looking at them. It's my time. It's not my brother's time. It's not my friend's time. It's not anybody else's time. It's when I'm ready. The grieving process is not about somebody else. It is about you. The other thing I want to talk to you about is I am the parent syndrome. This is one of the things that really irked me when I was in prison. And I heard so many people, I'm going to go home and they're my child. Yes, they're your children. But understand, your children have been with somebody else while you have been incarcerated. And it has not or was not their choice. The caretaker that has taken the money, the time, the compassion, and the love to take care of your children deserves respect. They may not be a person who's been nice to you. They may criticize you, and they might not be nice to you. But if they were nice to your children, if they've been abusing your children, I want you to turn them in. But if they've been nice to your children, and they've been taking care of your children, and they've been the affection and the love that your children have been receiving since you've been incarcerated, they deserve respect. It is not you leave prison and everything comes back to you. Your children have become accustomed to living with those people. They have formed a bond, whoever that may be, parents, relatives, friends. They have formed a love bond with the caretaker. And you tearing them away can do harm, emotional harm to your children. I am not saying that you have to leave your children there. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is take time for your children to get used to you. Take time for your children to obey you when you say something. Let your children adapt to you being home, even if that means allowing your children to stay where they're at for 6 months or a year and then gradually move them back in with you. I'm not telling you to give up your children. That's not what this is about. This is about not putting what you need first. Your children are babies. They're your babies, whether they're 2 months or they're 21 years old. They're your babies, and their needs should always come first. So take away your selfish thing of I deserve this, I want this. I know it's hard when you get out of prison. I'm living it currently. But I want you to know your children did not put you there. Your children, young children. Now, I don't know if you guys got cases with your children or whatever that are older. I'm talking babies. Please be kind to them. Please be kind and respect. I always said, and I said in the blog I posted, I would do some appreciation instead of expectation. Appreciate it. Don't just assume that you deserve these things. You expect it. Don't expect it. Be appreciative, because I've taken care of your children during a very traumatic time in your children's life. Okay, that being said, let's move on to, I use meditation a lot. Meditation helps me calm my nerves. It helps me deal with a lot of negative things that are going on around me. I do reframing. I do a lot of soul searching. That's what I had to do. When I came out of prison, when I was in prison, none of my relatives even wrote me, sent me a birthday card, did anything for me. I was forgotten. And it hurt. But then I learned through what I call Mosaic treatment program, and it was intense. So that was the other thing. I learned to reframe. I was in prison wrongfully, but I had to accept the fact that I was here, that the universe guided me to prison for a reason. And it was to sit me down and teach me that I needed to look at the other side of that population. So when I entered the Mosaic program, one of the major details that I got out of that program was I never worked on my trauma when I was younger. I was always taught that trauma was bad, and that if I was going to be a psychologist, which I was, a licensed doctoral psychotherapist, that I was not allowed to experience trauma, that would make me a crappy therapist. So I drug that trash along with me for the entirety of my life until this program. So there was a positive, and I was able to pull that positive out, that, hey, this program has helped me release a lot of that anger. So in releasing of that anger, I released a lot of anger I had towards my relatives. And I learned that them not contacting me was their issue. Whatever they were told, whatever they believed, if they didn't hear it from me, then they didn't hear the truth. They didn't look at my evidence. They didn't know the facts. And if they're going to judge me and not speak to me and not know the facts, then they weren't worth my love. And they weren't worth my time. And if they plain out just didn't respond because they didn't know anything but didn't bother finding out, then that's even worse. It means they had no love for me, knowing that I was lonely in a place where these people were hard, and some of them were hardened criminals. Actually, Cleveland wasn't that bad, but they, I was in there and I was alone and my parents were dying. I didn't even get a sympathy card from them. So why would I ever want to associate with these people again? The only relative that came to me was my cousin, Deborah Marangio Pennington, who I have had more respect for in the past 6 months than any one of my family members. Because guess what? She picked up the phone and she said, "Cuz, what happened?" And she found out the truth. And she says, "If you need me, I'm here." The only one. And that was the one that they all talked bad about. So, I want you to look at the relatives, and I want you to really sort that out and really reframe your thinking and give people chances in your family that you didn't think were positive role models. Okay? That is very significant. The soul searching part comes with what I had just said. Dig down deep. See where you went wrong. Admit your mistakes. Apologize. Build relationships. Build that trust again. Trust is hard to build. It's okay. Trust is always and will be an issue for trauma victims. We have a hard time trusting, and the people we encounter have a hard time trusting us. And it's okay. Start out small with small things. Okay? That's the biggest advice I can give you on that. Friends who abandon you, just get new friends. They're not even worth your time. If your friends and your family did not value your relationship and your love, why are you even bothering? They're not going to value anybody's love. They're going to desert anybody unless they've got a personal gain in it. That was just the way I reframed it, and that's the way I'm seeing. And I've been the happiest person in the world since I've realized love comes within inside me, hope comes from within inside me, and nobody can give it to me. I have to give it to myself. That's the biggest piece of advice I can give you. Let go of the hurt. Allow yourself to let go of the hurt and pain that is inside you. Just go outside, scream it, let it go into the air. It is not worth having. That negative energy is not worth having. As I had already said, the thinking patterns are very significant. I would do an assignment where if you think of something negative about yourself, or you're speaking with somebody and they say, oh, you always go out and use drugs when you get upset. You always do this. Well, if they want you to come clean, then they're really disrespecting you, because I'm going to tell you something. I didn't have a drug problem, but if my friend or my relative was using drugs, I would not tell them that, because I would be encouraging them to go use. And that is the most ignorant thing to say to somebody. And I would not go use and satisfy that person. I would look at that person as someone who doesn't know compassion and empathy yet. And I would just look at them and say, I'm sorry you feel that way. Please look at yourself and realize that I'm not that person. And until you can honor me as the new person I am, I do not want to associate with you any longer. And leave it at that. Don't argue. Don't try to prove your point. Because the fact of it is, and this is my saying I say all the time, it doesn't matter what they believe. The truth is the truth. When I was in prison, or I was in here, I was in 9/11. I was a first responder. I lived in New York City on Staten Island, for God's sake. I worked at Staten Island Hospital. And when this came down with my case, it got back to me that people were saying that I wasn't really in 9/11. And I was I was so angry then. It so much bothered me. And I sat across the table when I was incarcerated with my psychologist, and she said, really? Your doctor? You have a doctorate in psychology, so you were working at a hospital. She goes, I just want you to rationalize this for a minute. You were working in a hospital in New York City, and New York called all the hospitals in a 100-mile radius, but they just decided to skip Staten Island University Hospital. She says, how stupid do those people sound that they would not utilize somebody who was working at a local hospital to treat people with 9/11? She goes, how ignorant and stupid do those people sound? She goes, you know the truth, because that's not even rational. So I held that deep in my soul, in my heart, and I realized that, you know what, it doesn't matter what people believe. I know what I can do. I know what I am. And no longer does it bother me. So when I look back at my time in prison, that's the other positive that I take in it. I say to myself, I always used to let things that people say about me bother me. They do not anymore. Prison did not make me hard, but it made me courageous. It made me realize that what other people think of me doesn't matter, and it's none of my business. Period. Because I know the truth. I know the evidence I have. People could say, oh, she's guilty. Fine. Whatever. I got the evidence. And I keep saying that. And that's how you reframe your thinking, is you know the truth. You know what you have. Why do you allow other people to come in and break your spirit down? Don't allow it. That's what causes relapses. That's what causes recidivism. If people don't know what that is, that means reoffending, committing more crimes. And you let people come in and tell you who you are. You allow them to label you. And I talked about that in another video. Labeling is when society says this is what you're going to do, and it's like a prophecy, and you fulfill that. Don't allow them to control you, because that is something that most people I was in prison with hated. They hated people having control over them. That is control over you. Don't allow somebody else to tell you what you're going to think and do. And by fulfilling what they're telling you you're going to do, by saying, oh, well, I just might as well do it anyway. Everybody thinks I'm going to do it anyhow. That's what you're doing. You're giving them the control, and you're losing the control. And I want to mention one last thing of how I reframed my thinking. And it was so important, because I sat in a soul search on my bunk for hours with this. I said, why are you doing this? Why did I lose my practice? And with a silent, I don't know what happened or how this person know, and I'm not even going to mention names, but a staff member came in and said, I know what you're thinking, because the universe wanted you to take a different road. You were almost on the right road, but you weren't listening to the feedback of the universe. And I thought about that for a while. And I remember in my practice, a couple years prior to this whole traumatic event happening to me, was I had received 3 to 4 letters. And mind you, I had a practice since 2003. So understand that I just got these letters like 9-10 years. So I had been in practice for a while before I received these letters. And they basically were saying to me, they were from offenders in prison saying, I'm wrongfully convicted. Can you please help me? And I would sit there and I have tears running down my eyes, you know, because I'm a very sensitive person and I feel for people. And I just put it in the drawer and said, there's no way I can help them because people don't listen to me. People would prefer to spread around that I was crazy than listen to what I would have to say. And people only do that because they know what you're saying may be true. So they don't want to be devalued, so they call you crazy. That totally I became immune to in prison as well. I had great staff members who helped me with that one. But I'm going to move on. So I sat down and I thought, wow, what better way was the universe sending me a huge message than me being in practice for 7 to 8 years, never receiving a letter from any incarcerated person. And within 2 weeks, I received 4 or 5 letters that I stuck in my drawer and basically said I was too weak to help them. The universe set me somewhere wrongfully with every imaginable civil right violation that could happen to a person. None of my evidence was shown. None of my witnesses were subpoenaed. My private investigators and expert witnesses weren't subpoenaed and couldn't testify. Wow, what was the state hiding there? You know, my saying with that, how I reframe that is, if the state thought they had a strong case, why did they stop all my evidence? Right? I mean, it's pretty obvious. I mean, anybody watching that could figure that out. If they had all this evidence against me and they knew I was guilty, why did they stop all my evidence from getting in? I mean, I had 31,000 pieces of evidence, all withheld. I had all these expert witnesses, all stopped. So just think about that for a minute. Just sitting down and thinking rationally. So I have gone on way too long with this video. And what I am encouraging you to do is not do what I did. Kind of take my lessons and what I have learned and put them in practice. Take the skills I have learned without having to learn the hard way and learn from them. I would suggest that you get with somebody, get a life coach. That's what life coaches are here for. They're here to guide you into life transitioning. No better thing from helping you transition from being in prison back into the community to find your direction in life. That is what we're here for. You can look us up at www.breakingthechainswellness.net, and you can request, and it was absolutely, please contact me. Please get your free moving on phone call. I give you a free 30, and it's always more than 30 minutes. And I said I'd give you some advice on how to move on. Why not do that? I'm going to post the link. If you're reading this from the blog, you can click on from the blog. If you're reading it from YouTube, I'll give you the information below. But why not do that? You know, give it a chance. You know, it's no money to get that initial phone call. Let me give you some advice on how to start handling being released from prison a little bit better. So I'm going to sign off with walk in hope and never, ever, guys, give up. Please don't. There's always, I've said this in other videos, there's always a solution to any problem.